This is the Spirit and Wellness Show. News and information from a higher perspective. With your host, Harry Wilkinson. Yes, hello, welcome to the Spirit and Wellness Show. I'm your host, Harry Wilkinson. This is the show where we take a look at the days and weeks, events, happenings in the world of politics, as we're going to talk about today. Of course, everybody's talking about politics today, so I'm not going to be any different, at least for this week. But also happenings in the world of science and technology and entertainment and everything that we interact with on a daily basis. And we take a look at those stories and ideas, those things that are floating out there, and we take a step back and we look at them from a higher perspective. Now, in my higher perspective, we're talking about how we are creating these situations in our world, and we create them at the highest level, by the way. It's a metaphysical kind of perspective where we are one in mind, I guess, if you will. And on our highest level of being, we are creating these circumstances in order to provide us a space, kind of a play space, if you will, to experience those things that we wouldn't or don't experience at our highest level of being, because we are at that level powerful beyond measure, as Marianne Williamson has said. So that, in a nutshell, is what we're talking about. We take a look at these situations that oftentimes are button pushing for us, particularly when we hear stories on the news and they grab our attention for a minute, and then we have to move on. But it makes us feel very insecure about the world around us when we are hearing, all of these stories of fear-based stories of things that are going on in the world. And so, in order to sort of counteract that, and keep us healthy, personally healthy, in a wellness, perspective, well, there's basically two things that you can do. You can go into shutdown, turn-off mode, which is to, disengage, disconnect from everything that, you're connected to, in the media, including the internet and, your smartphone and everything else that we are plugged into these days. And that's not a bad method, and it'll work for a while, but it has limited results because, unfortunately, unless you are willing to, live on a mountaintop somewhere or on some sort of island, out of the mainstream, you're going to, at some point, have to be interacting with these things. It's just not, for some people it is feasible. Certainly monks and other religious types will go into, monasteries or other retreats where they don't have to interact with those sorts of things. And, that certainly can work for you if you're that type of person. But for the most of us are not that type of person. Most of us are trying to just live our lives and eliminate as much anxiety as we possibly can. So the other way that you can deal with it is, rather than try to push it all away, is to take it in. And by taking it in, I mean going into it. Actually, if it's bringing up fears and emotions, let those come to the surface. And then once you've sort of reached that point where you're feeling all of these feelings, you call it all into question. In other words, you remember that it is an illusion. As real as it seems and feels, it's an illusion, and it's an illusion that you have created. And take that step back and kind of feel the energy that you've put into creating this illusion. And you can even marvel at it, at the complexity of it, at how effectively it has pushed your buttons. And then once you see it for that, take the energy back. Take it back. And you'll find yourself feeling more confident, more empowered, less worried about things. And you'll feel like you have control, because you do. You have control over how you respond to these things. Are you going to work yourself into a frenzy, for instance, as many people are encouraging us to do, over the possibility of a Donald Trump presidency? Or vice versa, are you going to work yourself up into anxiety mode over the possibility of a Hillary Clinton presidency? Or are you going to see it for what it is, which is an illusion, a game that if you look at it right, you can see right through it. Because that's what happened to me as I was sort of floating in this sea of convention coverage for both the Republican and Democratic conventions. And I began to see through it all. I began to see, and at first it was startling, because I realized that none of this is real, and nobody's really talking about or dealing with issues in a truthful manner here on neither side. And I began to understand, at a higher level, that this is an elaborate game that we've created. And it is designed, as seemed to come out from all of the coverage, it's designed to once again make us experience this choice between love and fear. And again, as I say, that's an illusion. It's an illusion we create because we like to play this game. It's exciting. And it makes us feel what we, at our highest levels of being, can't feel, because we are way beyond it. But when we make ourselves feel, or we take a persona in which we are given limits, we are given weaknesses, we are given, it's like a role-playing game. If you've ever played role-playing games, what you do is you're in a scenario, and there are all kinds of role-playing games, most of them science fiction oriented, like Star Trek or Star Wars, and you are a character, and you roll the dice, and the dice gives you the limits. The dice tells you you have this much strength, You have this much ability, this much skill in fighting. You have this kind of power, and so forth and so on. And that's kind of like what we do on at the highest level. Um, we convince ourselves, we give ourselves a persona that has perceived flaws. Now, they are not the truth of us at all. They are not the truth of us at all. They are simply illusions we've created. But they are very realistic. And they can make us believe, if we lose sight of the truth of who we are, and get so immersed in it, make us believe that the limits that we have in this game are all we are. And that's why taking the step back is important. And I'm going to read the Bill Hicks quote again. I've had requests for that again. But this choice of love and fear. Now let me get back to that in just a minute here. So the love and fear is being played out in a number of ways here in this, as far as the political situation here in this country is concerned, in all of the conventions that we've just been through. Well, first of all, is sort of the media spin on it, which is not too far off base. It's very close, as a matter of fact. The basic spin is that, pardon me, Donald Trump, in his convention, and the Republican convention, particularly in his speech, was beating the drumbeats of fear, creating this vision of this sort of terrible world and all of the horrible things that we face, and placing himself as the hero of this, as the one guy who can make a difference, who can change, who can protect, who can keep us safe and make us great again. So that's on the Republican side, and that's obviously very fear-based. Now, on the Democratic side, you have this spirit of inclusiveness. You had all these speeches praising Hillary Clinton, praising her, her compassion and her warmth and her generosity and her concern for the working class, and so forth and so on. And you saw, of course, in the conventions, if you looked, you saw people of all colors and races together. And that also, is a message that's coming across. So this is supposed to be, the choice of love. That was the love aspect. That's the fear aspect. That's the positive, upbeat energy and the negative, fear-based energy. And there's some truth to that, for sure. However, it's very simplistic, and there's an awful lot of more complex issues going on here. Because, quite frankly, both the Republicans and the Democrats are using fear to get you to choose rather than love. And here's what I mean by that. Now, clearly it's easy to see in many ways how fear is being used on the Republican side, to paint this picture of terrorism, knocking